Happy Friday, Capital Region. This is Dayton Maxwell, Farm Business Management Educator with the Capital Area Agriculture and Horticulture Program. Coming at you again for week number 1,829 from my basement. Not really, but it seems like it. So I made my first farm visit this week. Haven't been on a farm in about 4 months because of the global pandemic thing. And I had a really nice discussion with a farm family. And one of the things they let me know, and congratulations for them, they said at the end of the day, we got done with our topic of conversation, and they said, oh, by the way, we have some extra money in the bank. How should we spend it? That was the question. And I said, well, good work, congratulations. Not a lot of people will tell me that ever. So good job. Only a few times more than a few times, maybe a dozen times in my career, a farmer has said, I have extra money. Where do I spend it? So my textbook response, my professorial response was, well, you should spend that money where it generates you the most return. And then I kind of sharpened up a little bit and said, well, wait a minute, let's talk about this. And by most return, I mean, does it generate income? Is it profitable? Does it lower costs? Things like that. But let's examine a little more in depth. Let's forget about that professorial statement. So my first question to the family was, how is liquidity? And liquidity, as you know from previous lectures, is the ability of a business to meet short-term obligations as they become due. And short-term obligations are operating expenses, things that are due within 12 months. Your feed, your supplies, all those kind of things, your electricity bill, your annual insurance bill, your 12-month debt service that you have to pay, all those things. That's liquidity. And when a business is not able to meet liquidity needs is when the avalanche starts, and then you run into, hey, I need to refinance, I got to term out some payables, things like that. So I asked family, I said, how's liquidity? They said liquidity is good. Awesome. So liquidity is good, and liquidity is from earnings, meaning the earnings that the family is generating from sales of products. So they're meeting their obligations, they're current, there's no outstanding payables. Again, congratulations for this family if you're watching, good work. And they're current on everything. So my next question was, what is the source of the funds? And they said, well, there's two sources to the funds. Some of the money came from the CARES Act, the USDA program, and that money we have in that savings account. And again, government assistance during this global pandemic thing. And the rest of the money came from, we sold a large piece of equipment and we have that money. Okay, so let's back up a little bit. So they have money from two sources, CARES Act and selling a piece of equipment. Now, if this business was lacking liquidity and they had accounts payable and they're behind and they're struggling, what I would have said is, well, use that money, whatever, and get current, get yourself shored up and get current. But since they're in a good financial position, I said, let's play a little matching game. And they said, what do you mean matching game? Well, we need to match the useful life of the assets with the useful life of where we spend it. So what I mean by that is this. They sold a large piece of equipment, and that piece of equipment, according to the IRS, had about a 7-year useful life, a lot longer life on that farm, but it has a depreciable life of 7 years. That money needs to go, again, assuming that we're liquid and we're current on everything, that money needs to go toward a long-term liability, meaning paying a loan that was used to finance equipment, or that money could go and buy another piece of equipment. So what we're doing here is we're taking an intermediate term asset and we're paying an intermediate term liability, or we're purchasing another intermediate term asset. So we're replacing it or spending it in a like manner. Let's say we sold that tractor, or actually not sure there was a tractor, but it was a large piece of equipment is what they told me. Let's say we sold that piece of equipment and we use that money to pay a supplier a 12-month supply. So what we would have done then is we would have taken a multi-year asset, in this case a 7-year or even longer, and would have used it up in 12 months if we use that money to pay a 12-month operating expense. And that's what I like to call cannibalization. So over time, if you sell enough of your assets that help you generate income, you can no longer generate income, right? Makes sense. So you sell income generating assets, eventually you can't generate income anymore. Or let me repeat that. If you sell income generating assets and use them to fund operations, eventually you can't generate income anymore. So they said, okay, so what you're saying is kind of match up the useful life of that piece of equipment with the place where the useful life of where we spend it, meaning on an intermediate term loan or a replacement piece of equipment. I said, exactly, good work. The next thing I said, well, the money from the CARES Act is designed to fund operations, so this is a no-brainer. And I said, well, let's fund operations. And they said, well, how do we do that? We're current on everything. I said, do you have an operating line of credit, a 12-month line of credit? They said, we do. I said, is there a balance on it? They said, yes. I said, well, let's pay off that balance. Let's get that operating line of credit paid down to zero. Again, an operating line of credit is a 12-month line of credit that farmers use to fund operations, gets paid back in 12 months, ideally paid down to a zero balance. And many times they're revolving, so what you pay down, you can borrow back. So because the CARES Act money was designed to fund operations, and even though operations were current, we have out there an outstanding operating line of credit. We're going to pay that down to a zero balance. The reason is because if liquidity gets tight, if we're struggling to pay short-term obligations, 12-month operating expenses, we have that line of credit that we can use to fund that. So we're guarding liquidity all the time, and if liquidity is all shored up, then we can spend money on intermediate or long-term assets. Okay, just think about that as you're spending money. And by the way, at the end of the day, what has to fund everything, what funds everything in your business is earnings generation through operations. So eventually, you sell, you make a small margin. Operations have to fund everything. Okay, they have to fund the equipment, they have to fund the land. Okay, all right. Hope you have a great weekend. As always, it's my pleasure to serve you. Please call me, especially you southern counties. Again, I'm at the northern end of the territory up here in Washington County. That's where my office is. And in my basement today. If you're down there in Greene County or Columbia County, especially in the southern ends, give me a call. I really want to meet you, get on your farm, and we can talk about farm business management. Okay. Have a great weekend.